Well, it looks like some local cops busted a roving gang of feds in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. I believe I'm saying that at least mostly correct. It appears to be a French name, and French names are always kind of tough. The official narrative is that there was going to be a gay pride parade in this, wonderful, very progressive city, I'm sure, in Idaho. It's a city in Idaho. That is so big and in metropolitan and enlightened that I haven't heard of it. And considering how large and progressive the cities in Idaho that I have heard of are, that doesn't inspire a whole lot of confidence. But nevertheless, there was going to be a gay pride parade because, if you've got at least two people, that's a parade, right? And so this evil white nationalist group, the Patriot Front, who I will get into a little bit later, they decided, no, we're not going to let this, not in our town. And they flocked to this very large city in Idaho from 11 states, apparently, to organize to try and put a stop to the gays marching in the streets. They were going to march themselves and show them gays, we see you, and we're not going to have anything to do with you. But lo and behold, before they could stage whatever attack they were plotting against the gays, the local police swooped in and arrested 31 of them. And you might be asking yourself, well, for what? Well, if they hadn't done anything yet, why were they arrested? These are just, 31 men wearing polo shirts and khaki pants, looking very, very optical. Definitely they didn't stand out or look like FBI agents. So what were they arrested for? And the answer that we got at the press conference yesterday was that it was a conspiracy to riot. And so the press, understandably asked the police, well, how did you know that they were conspiring to riot? How did you know that they were going to riot at all? These are just men in very unassuming looking clothes who all match and definitely don't look scary. And the response from the police was, well, we have informants, amongst the 31 men. Some of them are informants. And they use the plural, so that means more than one. And the press, of course, I shouldn't say of course, because the press doesn't normally press the police this hard, but I'm glad they did. They said, well, how many? And the police didn't respond. So we know that there were at least 2 informants in this group of 31 Patriot Front members, but that got me thinking, this Patriot Front name, I know it's generic, but it sounds somewhat familiar, and especially their uniforms. And I realized, oh, wait, aren't these those guys who were riding into D.C. In the U-Haul trucks and, singing sea shanties? I don't even remember what that was for, maybe January 6th or something like that, or some other event, but I remember they were riding into D.C. in U-Haul trucks. And if I remember correctly, the consensus was these guys were a bunch of feds that nobody knew, and to stay far away from them. And I think that was kind of the end of it. That it looked like, hey, these are a bunch of guys in FBI uniforms who took their FBI patch off and put on a Patriot Front, in scare quotes, patch. And they're so, cartoonishly, neo-Nazi in orientation that, they're Germanophiles even. They're not even, totally oh yeah, we're all about America, wink wink. It's no, we do like Hitler. And so, they're beyond even being able to recruit ordinary people, in America who might just be, right-wing American men who are, disaffected and don't like the gay agenda, and don't like, the Me Too movement, and don't like the anti-white stuff. This group just feels, completely inorganic. And we haven't heard a thing about them since the whole U-Haul truck thing, in which I don't remember if any of them got arrested for that either, but again, people at the time wrote them off as a joke. And now all of a sudden, they pop back up in some small town in Idaho, of all places, supposedly plotting, a terrorist attack on a gay pride parade. And so the question becomes for me, what are these feds up to? These guys, they're not like real people. The core of the group can't be. There might be some ordinary people mixed up in it who are, perhaps mentally disturbed and who were able to be sucked into this group. But at the core, obviously, there's not ordinary. It's not like this is a group that is led by ordinary people that the FBI has infiltrated. This is clearly a group that was created as a honeypot to try and entrap certain people, sure. But to me, it seems like they're using it more as undercover shock troops. These guys are a psyop, much in the same way that the Whitmer kidnapping plot was a psyop. The FBI does not infiltrate groups that are plotting to do bad things anymore, at least not as much as they used to. In order to justify their existence, because crime is not as rampant, organized crime especially, as it used to be, a lot of that's largely been broken up, the FBI has to create these groups out of whole cloth and then try to lure unsuspecting Americans into their organized crime organizations. That's what we saw with Whitmer, and that's almost certainly, what we saw here. In fact, the whole Patriot Front group here, these 31 men, could all be federal agents. We don't know. Because, to me, this is all about the narrative. It's not about trying to catch a few guys, going to some gay pride parade in Idaho. This was not a bust. This was an op. A psyop, I mean. Obviously, it's an operation one way or the other. This was intended to create the perception that, these far-right gangs are prowling the streets hunting for the LGBTQIA plus community. And yes, most of the official reporting I've seen characterized the event as that. They didn't call it a gay pride parade. They called it an LGBTQIA plus parade. And this is during a time in which they are trying to, push the gay agenda down people's throats more and more. And how will they finally do that? It would be by adding gender identity as a protected class to the very unconstitutional and flawed Civil Rights Act. By making it illegal, like it is in Canada, essentially to question or dispute someone who says, hey, I'm a woman, and I'm going to walk around the locker room here, with my junk hanging out in front of children. That is the ultimate goal. That's where they're going with this. They want to force it down your kid's throat. Quite literally in some cases. And they don't want there to be anything that you can do about it. And so this incident is supposed to create the impression that there is a need. Oh my gosh, see, this is why we need to have civil rights protections for the LGBTQIA whatever folks, the alphabet people. We need to make trans rights human rights. And it's all because of this constant threat that they're under from the right-wingers. Now, I don't think that a bill like that is going to get passed anytime soon. The Equality Act, though, is, it is sort of on the docket in the House. It's just not really gone anywhere because there isn't an appetite for it yet. But events like this are what build pressure for something like that. Remember, this reminds me of Jussie Smollett. Jussie Smollett, I think clearly. Jussie Smollett, a friend, personal friend of both Kamala Harris and Cory Booker, who were the co-sponsors of the anti-lynching bill to make lynching a federal hate crime. But there hadn't been a lynching in like 40 years. Then all of a sudden their friend Jussie Smollett fakes his own lynching. And at the time when they're trying to push that bill, the timing was a little too perfect to me. My feelers went up over that one, and my feelers are going up over this one. Especially when the FBI uses an obvious front group like Patriot Front. It's kind of the reverse of how most governments throughout history have used paramilitary groups. Normally, the goal of paramilitary groups and gangs of thugs like the brown shirts or the black shirts or the KKK in the case of America, and I'm not comparing these Patriot Front guys at all to the brown shirts, black shirts, and KKK. I don't want to, or I shouldn't say I'm not directly doing it. They're not analogous. These people are a drop in the bucket. Not even. They're a molecule. They're microscopic. But the principle is the same. You use these gangs of thugs to try, if the state does, to try and further their agenda without getting their own hands dirty. And so it used to be that these, authoritarian states would have their back channel to the paramilitary organization that is fond of them and say, hey, why don't you go murder one of my political opponents? And then that would happen, and the state would come out and go, oh, this is terrible. Isn't that just a shame? I condemn this, even though they were behind it the whole time. But in this case, the state is creating, sort of the paramilitary threat themselves and trying to pin it on their political opponents and say, instead of, having a paramilitary organization that is openly affiliated with the state and are openly friendly to the state, they try and create a fake paramilitary organization that is unfriendly to the state on the surface to try and tie to their political opponents in order to make themselves look better. We also saw this with the militia movement in the 1990s, which was manufactured by the feds. The goal back then was very clear. It was gun control. All we got out of that was the assault weapons ban, which had a sunset clause, only lasted 10 years. But they also originally tried to use that to pass the Patriot Act back in, I think, 1995, after the Oklahoma City bombing. And they couldn't quite get the Patriot Act done then, so they stored it away for a few years. By the way, Uncle Joe Biden was the main proponent of that, I believe, in the mid-90s. And then they brought back the Patriot Act after 9/11, and were finally able to get it through. So when I see an event like this that just stinks too bad, that's what I'm going to lean towards, because there's so many examples of it throughout American history since, World War II. Since we really have had, a federal deep state with all of these, various agencies running around the country and around the world. And, the cops have pretty much confirmed it. They said, okay, yeah, we had our informants in the group. They're never really informants. Informant is the wrong word. The correct term is agitator, progenitor, because that's the way it was in the Whitmer case. That's the way it is in so many of these cases. These FBI guys and these other federal agents, whether they be DEA or ATF, whoever, they're often the ones who are pushing the group forward. They're not just sitting back and observing and letting them go about their own devices. They are actively pushing things in a more radical direction. They groom people into terrorists for a living. And that's why federal agents, particularly the FBI, but then again, I've always had a deep-seated hatred for the ATF above everyone. They deserve not an ounce of respect and only contempt. We are so much more unsafe as a society because of their existence. They do not keep us safe. You can make the argument that certain local cops in certain towns, you can say, well, they do a good job, they keep us safe. But the federal agents, they don't at all. They're bad people, and they should be ashamed of themselves. And I think, like the Stasi, when all this comes apart, those people who were a part of this will live out the rest of their lives in shame. The same way that former Stasi informants and agents are living out their lives in shame in Germany. They're a cancer in our society that's been eating away at social cohesion for decades and trying to, divide people and push them against each other. All for what? For power? I don't even know at this point. So with that said, I will see you folks back here tomorrow.